BookTube, welcome back to my channel and happy 4th of July to everyone in the United States and those around the world celebrating the American independence. Today, of course, is Independence Day, and to celebrate, I'm going to talk about the red, white, and blue books on my shelves. Last year, I did a red, white, and blue video where red was a pun, meaning books on my shelves that I had read that were also red colored. White meant books that celebrated snow or winter, and blue were books that had made me sad. This year I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm just going to go with 3 red books, 5 white books, and 4 blue books because of the number of letters in each one of those words. So today, 3 red books on my shelves. I just chose at random The Curious Incident. Oh, and one more thing. While today is the American Independence Day, I want to celebrate America. America is the melting pot. People from all over the world compose the American culture and American society. And so the books that I'm going to choose today are not books that are necessarily set in America, but feature people from around the world in some way, or maybe they're just set in another country. So here we go. First red book is The Curious Incident of the Dog of the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. This features an English-British teenager who is on the autistic spectrum but is also a math savant, which means that he sees the world through math terms, and if things are not logical, he just can't deal with them. His neighbor's dog turns up dead, and he decides to investigate the murder, and he uncovers things that reveal secrets that his family has been keeping from him just because of his inability to deal with those things mentally. It is a beautifully emotional book about how people are protected by the people who love them, and about some of the lies that we tell in order to make things easier for those that we love, but end up hurting them in the process. My next red book is also international, Hag Seed by Margaret Atwood. This is Margaret Atwood's take on Shakespeare's Tempest. It features this play director named Felix, who has lost his job because of some conniving, backstabbing friends that he had in his industry. And after taking some sabbatical and kind of disappearing from the public eye, he resurfaces in this kind of small town, working in a men's prison where he decides to put on the same show that he lost his job over. Atwood used a lot of Shakespeare's original themes and characters, but also made it a play within a play, because we're reading a novel about a man who's putting on a play that is reminiscent of a play hundreds of years earlier. And that made it layered and funny and intriguing. This was a great way to incorporate 2 different cultures, a book set in Canada that is reminiscent of a book or a story or a play that was set in England. So international book in 2 levels. Third red international book we have is the Man Booker International Prize winner for 2015, and that's The Vegetarian by Han Kang. This one was translated by Deborah Smith, and together these women have produced and translated 3 works that have been well received in this part of the world. This one features a young married woman named Young Hee who's living in this traditional patriarchal Korean society when she starts having dreams and nightmares about animals and brutality to animals. And so she decides to become a vegetarian, but she also becomes more radical in that she decides to stop cooking meat for her husband and also throws out all the meat that they have. So not just a personal choice that she has made, but she's kind of enforcing her choice onto her family. And they just decide that they're not having it, because here's this woman, she's, you know, living in this male-dominated society. She can't assert her independence in her family like that. And so her decision sets in motion this chain of events that breaks apart her family. And so the book is told in 3 parts, all showing the effects of her decision on 3 people in her family. And so while this woman is the main character, none of the perspectives are narrated by her, and so we really get to see how women are viewed and received in this society, how they're viewed by other women, how they're viewed by the men in their lives, and just the interaction that people have with them when people are considered to be different, or people project a different image than what other people would want them to have. This story provides a really good opportunity for introspection on independence and what independence means to different people and in different places in the world. So it's a really great book to contemplate on this, the American independence. So those are 3 red books from my shelves. Now for 5 white books. Some of them are international, some of them are not. So we'll start with an international book because Jose Saramago is from Portugal and he is a Nobel Prize winner. This book is set in some unnamed country, and so it makes it like a book of the world, and it features unnamed characters where one patient zero is traveling home one evening. He's driving and he suddenly becomes blind, and someone offers to drive him home and in the process takes his car, and that person also becomes blind. And the patient zero, he goes to the eye doctor to try to get help, and his doctor becomes blind, and the epidemic of blindness spreads like this contagious force, robbing everyone in the community and eventually everyone in the city and eventually the entire population. And we're not sure what that means, whether it's population of that country, population of the world. It is a look at what it means to depend on people and how your dependence on people changes your relationship. The relationship between the man and his wife, one of whom is blind and one who is not, and how they interact with each other, whether the person who is being helped or the person who is helping, whether they resent the relationship or they resent the new reliance that this person has on them or the reliance that they have on this other person. And so this book provides a good opportunity to question what independence means in isolation versus in community versus in relation to the people that we know and love and already have relationships with. So Blindness by Jose Saramago is the first white internationally challenging book. Another white book, this one set in the United States. This Is Where I Leave You by Jonathan Tropper, who is a ridiculously funny author, except that his books are not for the faint of heart. They include coarse language and very derogatory ideas, but told in such a way that they almost seem necessary. I can't believe I just said that. Anyway, This Is Where I Leave You features a man whose relationships are tumbling around him in ways that he can't control. His father has died and he has returned home to sit Shiva with his family as they mourn and deal with the loss of the patriarch of their family. And the relationship that he has with his, can't remember if it's wife or girlfriend, has also crumbled. This Is Where I Leave You is a comical but also very serious look at relationships and the desire to strike out and become independent of toxic relationships, but how sometimes we hold on to things even after they have lost their usefulness, and what it means sometimes to cling to things that no longer have utility, and how we would be better off being more independent. I'm just thinking about it now and trying to add independence to all of these books. Another white book, whitish. This is Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. The book starts off in Nigeria with these teen lovers who get separated when the girl comes to the United States and the boy eventually goes to England, and the different experiences that they have as immigrants in those countries, but also the different experiences that male and female immigrants can have as they travel to different countries to make their fortune and to find a life. Americana is the name that the Nigerians call the people who have left Nigeria and gone to the United States and have become American, who have embraced Americanization and have become this new hybrid type of person who has this African background but also this new American experience. Some of it is probably admiration, some of it probably envy, some of it also resentment. In her writing, Adichie really philosophizes on that idea of becoming independent, of growing up and wanting to leave everything that you know behind so you can make your own way, and what it means to really be independent in a place, in a country that is unfamiliar, quite often unfriendly. This is not a perfect book. There are things in there that I didn't like, but man, this book challenges idea of independence in a way that if you are someone who's never left home, who's lived your whole life in the same place, this is a book that you should read just to understand some of the complexities, some of the challenges that people who are immigrants, whether international immigrants or just people who have left some part of their country and gone to another part of their country, what it's like to really strike out, to become your own person, to really move forward and claim a new name, a new identity, the Americana. Jamaica Kincaid is a Caribbean-born author who took a new name when she came to the United States, because she also talks about becoming this new person once she lived here in the United States versus the beginnings that she had in her native Antigua. Annie John is the name of two characters in this book, a girl and her mother, and it chronicles the experience that both women have, the girl and her mother, how their lives are very different, how the mother makes life very different for her daughter, even while she's teaching her how to become a woman, the limitations that she has because they're both living in two different worlds essentially, and what it means when the young girl grows up and leaves her mother's teachings behind to again go off and strike out into this new world and become this new identity, this new person. This book really explores what it means to have this stronghold place that you have grown up in, and this identity that was created for you by the people who loved you and created this world around you. While that life is composed of beautiful things, beautiful experiences, memories that you'll never give up, never want to give up, the desire to also move out and create this new identity for yourself, become this new adult, and maybe even have a new name. So like I said, Jamaica Kincaid started off with a different name and changed her identity and changed her name when she came to the United States. Annie John, the character in this book, starts off with her mother's name. And while a lot of this book I just assume is autobiographical, I also think about this young girl maybe changing her name when she leaves home so that she's no longer called by the name of her mother. Similar to the countries that were previously colonized, moving away from their motherland, their mother country, and establishing this new name, this new state, this new country with a new name, like United States of America. Final white book is Jodi Picoult's Small Great Things. One of the main characters in this book is Ruth. She's an African-American nurse. She works in a NICU in a major hospital, and it is her job to help premature babies who need things. And one of her patients one day is the child of a white supremacist, and when the parents find out that their baby is being tended by an African-American woman, they demand that she be taken off their baby's case. And so she receives orders not to touch this baby. And one day she's in the nursery by herself when the baby is in crisis, and she has to face the decision whether she's going to help the baby and keep the baby alive through performing maybe CPR, but also disobeying the orders, direct orders that she's received from her boss, or whether she's going to obey those directives but in the process also disobey the Hippocratic oath, which is to help, do no harm, right? So do nurses take that? I think nurses take that. It's not just doctors, right? I hope I'm not saying anything wrong. The choice that she makes has long-lasting effects, and so it sets about this chain of events that has her paying the price for the decision that she makes. And so in this way, this book really talks about what that freedom really means, how freedom is different for different people in this country, even in the 2000s. While the enslavement of black people officially ended in 1865 and segregation of the races officially ended in the 1960s, you could still see the ripples of that racial inequality in this book and in our society as we listen to the news and listen to current events. It really challenges the idea of freedom and equality versus inequality, and what independence means, what it means to get a job and still not be able to do it because of the color of your skin. While the author, Jodi Picoult, is Caucasian, and she has been challenged for whether or not she was qualified to write this book, as a Caucasian person writing about racism experienced by an African American character, I really applauded her for taking on the challenge. In the author's note, she expressed why she was motivated to write this book. And that question as to whether or not she's qualified to write this book, I think also challenges independence, because here she has created a character who's not able to do her job because of the color of her skin. And Jodi Picoult is a novelist. She's creating fiction for a living. Why shouldn't she be able to do her job because of the color of her skin? So even that discussion highlights racial inequality in this country. Reverse racism is still racism, and so this is a book that talks about that independence, the fiction, as well as the real life experience behind the fiction. So those are my 5 white books. I'm not going to talk so long about these blue books. I have 4 blue books, BLUE, and it would have been great if I'd gotten 4 books, one with B, one with L, one with U, one with E, but nah, I don't have that. First blue book is The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I read earlier this year, a different copy, but I just bought this one, a used copy at the store, so I'm happy that I'm able to put it in this video. This is a book that is set in England in some long ago time. It describes a couple at the end of their life and facing the challenges of old age, and so they decide to leave home and go reunite with their son who's left long ago. But while the story describes the physical journey of these 2 older people and the people that they meet along their journey to go reunite with their son, it's also an allegory for the choices that older people have about their lives, about what their end of life care should mean. It is a really interesting look at that independence. Oh my goodness. So when I started this video, I wasn't thinking about how these books talked about independence, but in this book, the author talks about the freedom that people should have to make their own decisions about their life, when their life ends, and the quality of life that they want to experience up until the end. And while I'm not a big supporter of euthanasia, I thought that this was a really introspective glimpse at some of the challenges that older people could face, because Ishiguro incorporated not just the personal history of these characters, but also the history of their country, the Anglo-Saxons, and the wars that had been fought, and the long-standing resentment that ensued. And so it made this book a rich, multi-dimensional reading experience about independence. Another blue book is To Rise Again at a Decent Hour by Joshua Ferris. This one was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize in 2014, I think. And it tells a story of a middle-aged dentist who is just having trouble in his personal life because of the inconsistencies in his life. He's a dentist, but he's not able to really communicate with people. So he spends a lot of time dealing with people's mouths, but he can't really communicate. But most of all, he's exploring these atheistic beliefs while he has this long-standing, deep desire to know and understand God. And so this book challenges religious identity and religious freedom, because while this man is trying to establish his own understanding, his own ideas of God, the supreme being, but also developing a relationship with God for himself, trying to understand the workings of God in his life, he's also having to deal with other people putting their own ideas of God onto him. Eventually in the story, someone starts to impersonate Paul online, and in his interaction with the person who is impersonating him, he feels like he's having these encounters with God. And so this book really challenges the idea of the exploration of religious freedom, religious identity, and what that means for us as people. What our independence really means when it separates us from God, what it really means when it separates us from our basic need for connection to a higher power. And so it really philosophizes on the price we pay for independence. Tell Me How This Ends Well by David Samuel Levinson doesn't look blue, but it does have a blue naked hardback. The story is set in 2022. In America at that time, there is a wave of anti-Semitism, which is reminiscent of the period before World War II. The Jacobson family is at the center of the story. They've gathered for Passover, but one of the sons, he's been traveling abroad, and he brings home a friend who is German. Having this German outsider in their midst, when they're supposed to be clinging to each other to protect their Jewish faith and their Jewish ancestry, becomes this moment of crisis for the family as a whole. But they're also dealing with all these other things. The parents are having domestic disputes, and so the 3 adult children decide to take matters into their own hands and separate their parents in their own way. While I don't necessarily love this story, this book highlights the need to protect the basic rights that are provided for in the American Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The need for the right to personal freedom, personal identity, personal choice of religion. We don't now live in the anti-Semitic society that is described in this novel, and don't necessarily experience this scenario that is rife with religious hate. It is one that we could see happening if we allow hatred to fester and develop. Hatred for any group. So while it's not a book that I loved or really enjoyed reading, it is a cautionary tale of the need to protect not just our own freedoms, but the freedoms that this country provides, and that we need to do our part to maintain, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us, because injustice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere. Is that what MLK said? Hope so. The final blue book is set in Japan. It's The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. It tells the story of a older man, a professor, who has had an accident, and so he's lost his short-term memory. The novel describes a relationship that develops between him and this new housekeeper who's hired to take care of him. And when she starts bringing her son to work with her, the relationship that also develops between this man and this young boy. But the book is really about the freedoms that we take for granted, and what it means, what our life really looks like when we have lost some of those basic freedoms. Like, this man doesn't have the freedom to live by himself. He's not decrepit, he's not enslaved, except he is a slave of his personal situation. Because of his disability, he's no longer able to take care of himself. And his story could be symbolic of how quickly the things that we take for granted could be taken away from us, and what life looks like when we're no longer free to think for ourselves or to choose for ourselves. And so this book explores that idea of independence from a very different perspective. There's the man, it seems like, had a very full, rich life before the accident, and you know, to compare his present experience of not being able to remember basic things. A man who was a professor who's now having to pin things to his shirt in order to remember where he is or his name, or he can't go out by himself. It really looks at that idea of personal freedom and what life looks like when it's lost, and how easily that loss could take place. So thanks for watching this video where I shared with you 3 red books, 5 white books, and 4 blue books that most of them talked about freedom, at least after I decided on what the theme of this video was. Subscribe if you haven't already. I promise next video is going to be better. I say that every time. But share this video with someone who doesn't know that I have a booktube channel, another book lover that you know who would enjoy a bookish conversation. And it's only a conversation if you comment down below. So comment down below, we'll talk down there. And until next time, happy 4th of July, happy reading.